Hi, my name is Nati, and today we're going to be having a look at new updates to the Power Platform Pipelines solution. In this update, we've got new features like scheduled deployments, extensibility that allows us to use custom logic for deployments, the ability to deploy via the Power Pages portal, as well as including release notes into deployment. So let's get straight into it. Is head over to our admin center and open up our host or production environment where our previous version of pipelines was installed. We'll head over to D365 applications and we'll scroll down to see where our Power Platform Pipelines is, and you should have an update available there. Click on the update available and it will install the latest version. Once that's finished installing, we now need to enable the extensibility functionality within Power Platform Pipelines. You don't need to enable the extensibility functionality for scheduled deployments, but we're going to take that step first now to show how we can use it going forward. So we head over to our production environment and we'll open up our configuration app. Now, if this is your first time seeing Power Platform Pipelines, I've left a link below with my original video as to how to get started with Power Platform Pipelines and set up your first pipeline. So I've got a few pipelines I set up before. We're going to use my test pipeline. Now this pipeline follows a very simple process where we've got my sandbox that goes into QA, UAT, and production. When you're creating a new deployment stage, so we're going to have the name for it, what its previous stage was, where it's going to. We've now got this option called pre-deployment step required. And this allows us to now enable extensibility with that custom logic. So, for instance, if I want to go from sandbox to QA now, I've enabled pre-deployment steps for it over here. So now when going forward, I can actually, when I want to deploy from sandbox to QA, I can then therefore use that logic. So now that that's enabled, let's head over to our solution that we're going to test with. So if we head over to our solution over here, I've got a PNP demo solution. Head over to pipelines, and we're going to use our test pipeline. Fantastic. We're going to say deploy here, and you'll see this already looks slightly different. We've got the ability to deploy for a deployment schedule, which we can do now or we can do later, so we can schedule a date and a time. Another teaser that Microsoft have left us for now is that in the future, admins will be able to control specific schedules within the organization, so they can set predefined times when makers or developers can use deployment pipelines and deploy during office hours or after office hours. That's going to be a really neat one coming out as well. So if we say deploy now, we click on next, we should have the ability to also add release notes, which is fantastic. So while that's validating, it may take a couple of seconds. Fantastic. So we're going to be releasing a version 0.4, and now we can add deployment notes as well. So let's add testing release notes. And now before I deploy it, I want to now apply that custom logic with the pre-deployment steps. So we don't need to do it for the scheduled deployments, we do need to do it with logic. So if we head over to Power Automate, we can start creating a flow. The downside about it is that being that the solution itself is actually installed in our host or production environment, we have to build that logic in our production environment. So it kind of defeats the idea of being able to follow an ALM infrastructure or framework where you want to build a logical or process within a sandbox going to QA, UAT, and then going to production to use it. When we're applying logic for pipelines, we have to build it directly in production, which is kind of weird. But anyways, we're going to create a new flow. It's going to be an instant flow. I'm just going to say skip for now. And we're going to use a Dataverse action. So when an action is performed trigger. And the reason why is the way that Power Platform Pipeline works now is that when a deployment is requested, we're going to be using Dataverse business events to trigger our Power Automate flow. So let's give this a name called Power Platform Pipelines Approval. Now when we configure our trigger, we're going to use the catalog. We're going to select Microsoft Dataverse. For our category, we're going to select Power Platform Pipelines. Now, if you were to go and start configuring this in, say, another environment where you don't have pipelines installed, you won't have the option, obviously. Tables, we're going to select none. And then for the action name, we've got a variety of different types of logic we can apply. We've got when a deployment has been completed, when we request deployments, when one has started, when a pre-deployment is completed, or when a pre-deployment has started. So for our specific use case, we're going to say on deployment requested. And then we're going to start an approval process. So let's look for our approval connector. We're going to say start approval, and it's going to be first to respond. We'll say deployment for, and now we can even use some dynamic content from that specific action. So we're going to use our artifact name. I'm going to assign it to myself, and for our details, we'll say please approve deployment for our artifact name by the pipeline, which is fantastic. Pipeline add a version of and bring through our artifact version. How fantastic is that? We can also provide a link to our artifact as well, which is also really nice. Now that we've configured our approval, we need to just configure our condition to say what happens if it gets approved or rejected. So if we say approve, we then can perform a Dataverse unbound action. So if we search for our Dataverse actions, we'll say perform a unbound action, and we've got a variety of action names we can choose from. So if we actually search for deploy over here, or pre, we can see we can use on pre-deployment completed, on pre-deployment started, etc. For this specific use case, because we're requesting a deployment first and we're going through an approval process, we're going to say update pre-deployment step status. And then we're going to be able to configure what that update needs to be. So when we want to approve a deployment, i.e. we approve it and it's going to be deployed from sandbox to QA, we're going to use the code 20. 30 means that it's rejected and 10 means that it's pending. We can add comments in there as well. And in order now for this unbound action to update the deployment status, we need to also relate it to our stage run ID from our action performed. So that will, if it's approved, it will update our deployment step to say, okay, this deployment is ready to go through, and it will automatically then deploy it from your predefined environments. And then the same applies then for if it's rejected. So we can say Dataverse perform an unbound action. We're going to say update pre-deployment status. We're going to call this one 30. Rejected, and again we're going to link it to our stage run ID. And that's basically it. We've built a really straightforward, simple approval process to kind of release a deployment when it's been requested. So if you click on save, let's save, fantastic. Okay, we're going to keep a little eye out over here because we're going to want to see what happens when it runs. So we're now ready to deploy. Let's click on deploy, and that should send me a Teams notification now to approve the deployment. What's also really convenient is that at any time the user can request it to be cancelled as well. Now for the time being, right now, the deployment occurs within the user's name. So because I'm deploying it, it occurs in my name. In the coming future, Microsoft have said that we will be able to use service principals to deploy it, which is fantastic news, but that's still to come. Now, while this is happening, fantastic, we can see we've got an approval process over here. Let's just double check, see if we can go back a stage and see if it's saying cancel. It's still exporting the artifact version to 1.0.0.4. Okay, well, while that's happening, let's go and say approved. Nearly there. And we'll say approve. If we head back to our Power Automate flow, we should now see that our approval process took place. because it was approved. Ooh, no, that's not good. Ah, that's why, because it hadn't created the artifact yet. So we can still cancel deployment. So if I were to say rerun that, now it should work. Because the artifact hadn't been created yet and it wasn't ready to be deployed yet, that's a nasty little bug actually. It failed to do so. So let's try to prove it again. Fantastic, and you can see our result is yes, it's been deployed. So we head back to our pipelines, currently deploying version 1.0.0.4. Fantastic. And it's as simple as that. We've actually used custom logic through the extensibility features to deploy a solution via an approval process from our development environment to our QA environment. So let's just give it a couple of seconds while it deploys. I'm going to head over to my QA environment now to see that if it rocks up. We're going to look at version 1.0.0.4. Fantastic. It's still coming through. But it's a really, really nice little feature. And what's also great is you can see all the run history as well. You can see that it's busy deploying. And we can actually see information about it as well. We can see our deployment notes saying test release notes over here. If it were to be rejected, we can see the reasons why it was rejected or why it failed as well. So that's pretty nifty. But while it's deploying, I can pause pretty quickly and see if we can come back in a few seconds. Fantastic, so successfully deployed to our QA. If we head over to our QA environment, let's just refresh quickly. We can see our solution is successfully there as version 0.4. Run history, it's all worked perfectly fine, deployed by myself, and that's through our custom knowledge. How fantastic is that? So there you go. With the new Power Platform Pipelines update, we can apply custom logic through the extensibilities. We can now do scheduled deployments, and we can include release notes in our deployments, making development life so much easier and the ALM process that much more efficient and easy to use for general citizen developers and other makers. So that's it from me. If you enjoyed this video, give us a subscribe, check out my blog, and yeah, have a great night. Cheers.